Should you be afraid of hell? I'm going to answer this in 3 different parts. First, I'm going to talk about the way, kind of contextualize this question in, how Christians often answer this question, and how if you ask another Christian, like your Christian pastor or a Christian friend or a Christian mentor or something along those lines, how the answers that they commonly give to this question. And then I'm going to move over to an answer I'd like to provide. And then I'm going to talk about different ways that you can react to this answer, both for Christians and for atheists. So first, if you talk to Christians about this, you're probably going to get 3 different answers. First, if you're like, I'm really afraid that so-and-so is going to go to hell. I'm really afraid of my parents going to hell. There's stories of, and it's really sad actually. There's stories of like these kids, right, who might have atheist parents, and they're told about the concept of hell, and they go home in tears saying, "Are my parents going to hell?" Like, and you might be experiencing that on another level. There's this common fear: are my parents going to hell? Is my atheist brother or sister going to hell? Is somebody that I really care about going to hell? And in response to this question, oftentimes the answer that comes back is a couple things. One, don't doubt God's judgment, because God's going to be just, and so He's going to take care of it. So however hell works out, somehow, if that person's going to hell, they deserve it. And second, what you need to do is go tell the person the good news of Jesus Christ. So as opposed to just worrying about hell, they'll tell you, for that other person, you need to push that worry and fear of hell into the direction of telling the person about hell. Now this might give you a little bit of guilt. Like, I'm friends with this person. Why am I not telling them about hell? Right? It might inspire some guilt in you as far as, okay, if I really care about this person, why am I not warning them about this place? And there's a way to deal with that guilt. I'm going to get to that in a second. But first, so those are 2 ways, right? Fear of hell for other people. Don't doubt God's judgment, and tell other people about the concept of Jesus Christ saving them from hell, in the hopes that they will repent and be saved. And then there's also the other one, when you have a fear of hell for yourself. People say, do you have some type of secret sin in your life? Like, there's this concept, or do you doubt that Jesus Christ has saved you? There's this concept that if you are afraid of hell, then that means that you're probably going there because you're afraid of actually going to hell. And why would you be afraid of going to hell if you're going to heaven, right? So there's that whole thing of, okay, if you're afraid of hell, maybe you need to focus on heaven more. And maybe you need to head more in the direction of Christ and realize that He saved you. And it's about grace, not your works, and so on. Depending on what kind of church you go to. Now, I think this fear of hell is something completely different. I think it's a lot like, say, if some afternoon, your best friend calls you up and is playing a prank, as best friends do sometimes, and says something like, you are going to prison for first-degree murder. Please report to the precinct immediately. You might be like, hey, is this whatever your friend's name is? Is this Jimmy? What's going on here? And Jimmy might be like, well, if you don't report to the precinct immediately, you're going to have 10 years added onto your sentence. Now, why do you ask the question? Because you're not really sure. You're a little bit afraid of the threat, but not completely. And so when somebody gives you a threat, you're not immediately sure it's the case. If somebody says in a crowded building, I think there's a fire, you might look around for evidence of a fire, and if you see smoke and there's a legitimate threat, you might shout fire in a crowded building and actually run out. But you wouldn't do it without some evidence. You want to make sure that there is evidence that this is actually the case. So I don't think that if you're afraid of hell, you should just automatically go tell people about hell. I mean, I think that's kind of ridiculous on a certain level, because your fear might come from a level of uncertainty as to whether or not hell is the case. And if you're not going out and telling people about hell, maybe it's because you don't really believe that hell exists. Because think about it. If you did believe that hell exists, you'd go out and tell people about it. If you're not telling a bunch of people about it and warning them and trying to bring them to Christ, maybe it's not because of some deficiency in you. Maybe it's because you genuinely have doubt that hell actually exists, and you need to go and investigate that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with doing that. Why would there be? This is literally supposed to be the worst place imaginable, right? It's supposed to be worse than anything else you could possibly ever imagine. So why would you not investigate it? Why would you not make sure that it's a genuine threat if it's supposedly so terrible? It doesn't make sense to me. And if it is really a terror, if it doesn't exist and you're telling people that it does exist, you're doing a lot of psychological damage to people's lives, and you're putting them in a relationship of control that really shouldn't be there based on false evidence. So investigate it. Make sure it's true before you tell other people. And you're also making it impact your judgment of other people. This is a controversial point, but I think it's true. That if hell doesn't exist, and you are judging people and saying if they don't believe in God, somehow they deserve hell, when they really don't deserve hell because hell doesn't even exist for them to deserve it, then you're doing them a disservice in talking with them and trying to figure out exactly, and being their friend, and seeing if they're a decent human being, right? Because somehow you have to believe that they deserve hell. So I don't think that's very healthy for friendships. And in addition, you yourself, if somebody tries to use this fear of hell to try to trap you in a relationship of control to where they can control your actions and control the way you think about things, and say, well, if you're looking at the concept of hell, that's because you have secret sin in your life, and use that to control the way that you act throughout your entire life. That's your entire life in a relationship of control, because you were never able to examine a concept to see if it was real or not. This whole thing is basically a mechanism to cut off inquiry and to cut off you being able to honestly examine the concept of hell and see if it actually exists. So, if you have a fear of hell, I would say try to put that in the direction of figuring out whether or not hell is a real place. And don't just go to Christian apologetics. Here's why. Christian apologetics have a lot of really neat psychological tricks. Kind of like the one I just talked to you about. Like, the one I just described to you was, if you think that, if you're doubting hell, then that means that you're probably going there. So, referring you to Christian apologetics is often going to say, is often doing the thing of, if that psychological trick didn't work, maybe there's another one that will. And as long as you're in that echo chamber of Christian apologetics, then you're never going to hear another opinion, and maybe there's going to be another psychological trick that might work even better than the ones that have already been described. But what I've found is that if you look at the different sides, if you don't just look at the Christian side of things, but also look at people outside of Christianity and what they think about the concept of hell, and carefully weigh the concepts as opposed to just going by a whim or being manipulated by psychological tricks, then you might actually rationally see that hell doesn't exist. Now, you'd have to do this for yourself, but that's what happened from my perspective and from the perspective of a lot of people who have actually done this. Now, it might take your emotions a little while to catch up. It's a little bit like if you've ever had a vivid dream. It might take you a little while to realize that the vivid dream after you wake up didn't really happen, and that you're not really in it. I don't know if you've ever been in that middle space. Maybe you know what I'm talking about. But as your emotions are trying to catch up to your rational realization, a lot of Christians will try to pull you back in by saying, with that old logic, well, now you have this fear of hell. That must mean that you believe that hell exists. Which is absolute crap. It just takes your emotions a while to catch up to your rational mind. I mean, think about it. There's like over 4,000 religions in the world, each with their own concept of hell. And a lot of denominations and, you know, smaller parts of religion with their unique concepts of hell. There's 38,000 denominations in Christianity alone, and I have yet to see 2 Christians that have the exact same view on the concept of hell. So, the chances that you got it right, so why aren't you afraid of all these other concepts of hell? And once you figured that out, you might be able to deal a little bit more with your own fear of hell. But that might still be something residual. There might still be something residual there. Which is why I'm going to address atheists. If somebody is struggling with the fear of hell, I would encourage some compassion. Because deconverting is a very traumatic process for a lot of people. Some people get post-traumatic stress disorder, some people get severe anxiety and so on from it. So realize that this person has been brainwashed, and just because you're not afraid of hell doesn't mean that somebody else hasn't had this fear of hell deeply inculcated into their psyche and the way that they think about things. It might take them a little while. It might take a little while for that to wear off. So I would encourage having a little compassion with them, as opposed to just saying, well, you need to be rational. Because we're emotional beings too. We have emotions and rationality. And they're not really 2 separate things. That's kind of more of a Christian concept of trying to separate, okay, the atheists are rational and the Christians are more emotional. That might be more of a certain kind of Christian mindset, or a dualism. We're both. And so recognizing both, I think, is somewhat important. Alright? Hopefully that helped you guys out. Thanks.